как дела?
Hello, Каргадвар. У меня все хорошо. А вас как?
Нормально, спасибо. Richard, how many languages do you speak, and which language is most important to you and why?
Okay, so I have learned or studied or speak 9 languages in total. Of these, 8 are foreign languages, 1 my native language, English.
Wow.
On a regular basis, I speak 6 of those 8 foreign languages. So basically, weekly or even more often, I converse in Russian, Georgian, Ukrainian, Polish, German, and Spanish. The languages that I'm not actively developing right now are Slovak and French, simply because I don't have a good reason to work on these languages right now, and I don't have, it's a question of motivation above all. I don't have plans to visit these countries soon, but maybe I'll return to those languages in the future.
And which language is most important to you?
I would say if I had to pick one of those foreign languages, I would definitely choose Russian. For 20 years now, I have been keeping all my personal notes in Russian. I do everything in Russian. If you looked at my computer and searched around there, you'd find that almost everything is in Russian. If I have the choice of reading a book in English or Russian, I choose Russian. Russian is also related to my work, to my personal life, to my long-term interests and goals. So definitely that would be Russian.
I see. Tell me please, how can people learn a foreign language quickly and effectively?
Well, first I would answer the question, why people do not learn languages quickly and effectively. So almost everyone studies foreign languages or is trying to learn them or would like to learn a language better, but only some of them are doing so in an efficient manner. And I see 2 main reasons for this. The most important reason is that people do not get enough speaking practice. So they are studying more than they speak. If you ask people why they are learning a foreign language, what they would like to achieve out of a foreign language, with their knowledge of a foreign language, most will answer that they would like to speak fluently. And yet, if you look at how people are spending their time as they learn or study a foreign language, most of their time is spent studying, not speaking. So people say they would like to speak, but when they work on the language, they study, not speak. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that people tend to spend their time developing familiarity with the language, but not developing command. This is a bit more complicated than the first point, but maybe I can talk about that in a minute. So to answer the question, how can people learn a language efficiently, effectively, and easily? Step number 1 is simply get more speaking practice. There are many ways to get speaking practice. You can find a native speaker and have a language exchange. You can do the same type of language exchange online. You can pay a native speaker, as I often do, to get more language practice. You can also find a fellow language learner and have a kind of language companion, language buddy with whom you practice speaking the language together. You have real conversations with this person in the foreign language, even though they are also learning the language like you. Or you can attend a language club, or you can travel to the country and get language opportunities there. So there are many different ways to get speaking practice, but if you want to learn a language quickly and effectively, step number 1 would be to increase the amount of actual speaking practice, conversation practice that you are getting. I would recommend getting 3 times more practice speaking a language than studying. In other words, if you have, let's say, 2 hours a week to spend improving your language skills, I would spend 1.5 hours a week speaking, conversing in one of those formats, and just half an hour doing everything else. If you look at how most people study languages, and most people study them inefficiently, I think we can say that with confidence, it's usually the other way around. So people are studying much more than they speak. And this creates a systematic a systematic problem that is then hard to resolve. So you can get language practice. There are many ways to do it. That would be step number one. Step number two is to learn to focus on command, building language command instead of familiarity with a language. Unfortunately, if you go to most language courses, language classes, most formal language education gives you lots of material to study and a little bit of practice with this material, but in the end, what do you find? You discover that you've learned hundreds or thousands of words, phrases, grammar concepts, word forms, bits and pieces of the language, but when it comes time to speak and you open your mouth, you can't remember this material fast enough, or you've remembered it incorrectly, you make mistakes, you don't know what to say. And so we see the process of learning information on a mental or abstract level is very different from the process of learning to use the material in actual practice. This is a bit more complicated than simply increasing your speaking time, but it's not that hard. The main focus should be mastering material that comes up in your speaking practice. So instead of a situation where your language teacher gives you a bunch of words, vocabulary, grammar, and other material that you've never seen before, or that you don't know when you're going to use, it's much better to focus on things you say that you're not sure of, things your partner says that you understand, but you wouldn't have been able to say them yourself. Or little phrases, maybe ways of putting together words that you know, that you wouldn't have been able to say yourself. So it's a focus on improving what you already know instead of trying to learn new material. So basically, instead of focusing on new material all the time, focus instead on improving what you already know partially and getting that partial knowledge to complete knowledge. As a general rule, it requires much more repetition to really learn and begin using a new word, phrase, or grammar concept, or word form than people expect. So the focus should be more on the physical act of repeating and using material in real-life conversation than on activities such as memorizing, studying, reading, listening. All those are useful, but people do too much of this. And so what happens is they become very familiar with the language. They know lots of words at an abstract level. They understand a lot, but when it comes time to speak or write, they make mistakes that they shouldn't make because they already have studied that material. So, to summarize, two things are necessary. One is to get a lot more speaking practice than you already do, probably 3 times more speaking practice than study activities. And the second step would be to focus on improving the material you already understand and really mastering that material and not focusing your attention on new stuff.
Which skills or qualities are necessary in order to learn a language well, in your opinion?
I think the most important quality, if there is one, is the ability to pay attention to what people are saying. It's like if you're learning any physical skill, the quality of being able to observe someone and really watch closely what they're doing. This is the same quality that is so important in language learning. It's the ability to listen to what people are saying and really analyze. Listen to every little word. When someone says a phrase, you try to hear every little part of that phrase and not just listen in general to what they're saying. Of course, it's very hard to focus intently on exactly what people are saying all the time, but at least some of the time, turn on your technical listening skills and really listen closely to what people are saying. I would say that is the most important skill.
I know that recently you published a book about language learning. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, this is a very small book. I call it an instruction manual. It's called Foreign Language on the Fly, the Frictionless Mastery Method. Frictionless Mastery is the name of my brand. That is what the method is called. That is what the algorithm is called, which I use day to day in my own personal language learning. And here in this short manual, which takes about an hour to read, I write very clearly and briefly what is necessary at each stage of the learning process. So what is the first thing you should do when starting a foreign language? What is the second thing? I just talked about speaking and focusing on command instead of familiarity. All that is discussed in detail in the book. For people who are much further along in their language study, I give a method and ways to improve your language study, even if you're an advanced speaker. Because, as you know, there's never any end. There's never an end to our potential for language mastery. We can always improve. And even if you are totally fluent in a language and use it for your professional life, use it personally and professionally, there's still things you can do to improve it. And you will find all of that written out in careful detail in this book.
Richard, thank you very much for this very interesting and useful conversation, and I wish you all the best and success.
You're welcome. Thank you.